Welcome to the Be a Smart Woman podcast. Everyone has their own story to tell, and you never know what impact your story might have on someone else's life. This is the foundation of the Be a Smart Woman movement. Our movement seeks to empower women through the sharing of their journeys with other women. Sometimes we don't even realize the lessons that our stories hold until we share them with others. I am Claire Faithful, founder of Be a Smart Woman. And it is my hope and dream that this podcast will illuminate personal lessons for you, the way listening to other women's stories has inspired me for years. We are so glad you are here. Let's enjoy this journey together. Today we will be talking to the awe-inspiring Alison Sher. Alison is the renowned author and expert on the subject of millennials. Her book, The Millennials' Guide to Changing the World, is captivating and gives us all great insight into the world of being a millennial and the challenges they face. In episode 1 of this 2-part series, Alison will be sharing what led her to write this book, what it is like to be a millennial in the world where older generations think they are floundering and only living up to a small sliver of their full potential. Welcome everyone to the Be a Smart Woman podcast. I'm so happy you're here, and today we have the most wonderful guest, Alison Sher, and she's going to be obviously talking to us about her wonderful book, The Millennials' Guide to Changing the World. So welcome, Alison.
Thank you, Claire.
So good to have you.
Yes, I'm glad to be here.
So, I've read a little bit of your book. I really like it. And I just was wondering, I think our audience would like to know what led you to write this book. I mean, it's a very profound book, and I think it is really, from my perspective, is really going to help millennials become more aware of who they are, but also helping maybe the baby boomers and people of all the other different generations becoming aware of how we can all work together. So that's just was my hit on it, but we want to hear from you. So tell us all about it.
Well, it's actually, I've been blown away that I thought I wrote this book for millennials, but it seems to be the people that find it the most useful are the baby boomers, are the older people who have a hard time understanding who the millennials are as a generation. So because this book is really, I interviewed millennials from all different walks of life in there, from the homeless person sleeping on Wall Street to the millennial who goes straight to Wall Street to, make a killing, and everything in between, from farmers to successful startup entrepreneurs. So really all the different faces of the millennial generation are in there, and we are an incredibly diverse generation. We're one of the most diverse generations in history. So I thought the only way to figure out who we are is to interview all the different types of perspectives that exist inside of this generational group. But yeah, I was curious about my peers. I think I wanted to belong to something, I'm like, oh, I'm a millennial. I belong to something. And I also graduated right in the Great Recession, and I noticed that a lot of my peers were unemployed or underemployed, and we felt lost in the world. And I personally was incredibly confused as to how even the world works. I was like, here I was, like out of the playpen and into the wild unknown of the real world from college, and I was blown away. I couldn't really understand what was going on or how to navigate it. So I thought I would write a guidebook.
Wow.
For millennials to really understand how our system works, because you need a map if you're going to find your way
right
to where you want to go. And I really believe that from what I know about this generation, is where we want to go, is we want to change the world, because we're inheriting a lot of global crises, and our systems need urgent changing in order for us to mitigate the impact of climate change that is forecasted to bring prosperity back to the people in a time period where there's a lot of wealth polarity. There's a lot of problems that the millennials are inheriting, and it's up to us to interact with the system in a way that makes it so that we have a future that we can be in control of.
Right, and I know that from as I'm from a different generation, that there is that conversation of, oh, millennials don't really care, or they're in their own little world, or they're unreliable, or whatever it is. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I have heard that, and yes, sometimes we can joke. I think it's just a condition of being, when you're 20, you're not always as responsible. I think we've all been there, but I just wondered how whether that bothers. Like, does that bother you? Does that sort of judgment that there's out there? I hear it. It's like people go, oh my God, it's like being cursed because you're a millennial. It's like the minute, oh, I'm a millennial, it's like, then it's like, oh, does that mean I can't? Somebody said to me the other day, I'm trying to break this curse of the millennial, so I'm going to stay in my job for 3 years. And I went, oh, okay. Like, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, we have the worst PR of any generation in human history, I would say. And it's funny, my consulting service that I have is called Millennial Inc., and it stands for Millennials Incorporated, and it's all about breaking the curse of being a millennial inside of organizations. To a millennial, yes, 3 years staying at my job is a huge deal, and the baby boomers are like, try 30. Try 30. And we're like, we don't want to try 30. And it's partially because the system, it doesn't reflect us culturally. And one of the things I work on is like, it's about millennials incorporating. It's about incorporating us and integrating our generational values into society, because they are the generational values that ultimately need to be integrated for us to solve the crises of our times. But there's a lot, there are things that millennials do that make it so that we're not really effective at changing the world. And that's a message that really needs to come out there. I think a lot of millennials are criticized because we have this victim mindset. And it's not that it's some of it isn't true, because it's true. We're going to inherit billions of dollars of forecasted damage in climate change.
Right.
In the way that income polarity has made it incredibly hard for millennials to earn a middle class living the way other generations previously could. We're inheriting trillions of dollars of federal debt. To us, it seems like the system is completely broken, and yet what we find is when you have a victim mentality, you give up opportunities to empower yourself left and right, because you don't even see that they're there. And my experience with working with baby boomers and working with people who do care about the future of this earth and do feel some kind of responsibility for the legacy they're leaving the coming generations is, they're like, I want to empower millennials with the resources that I have, but I can't even get them to pick up the Greg damn phone and give me a call back. Like, they just want to like sleep in all day, or they're too stoned to show up on time, or whatever it is, because we are sometimes like we're so in our muck that we don't see the opportunities that are there. And because of that, we don't live up to our full potential. And that's something I am working to provide answers to, is how to get out of it. And I hope that's what my book helps provide millennials as well.
And your book is profound. It's a really wonderful book, and I highly recommend everyone listening go out and buy the book, whether you're a millennial or not, because just for me, it really helped me understand, like my daughter who is 24, and how, she'll say something to me like, Mom, that's not how we do it now. And so now I'm going, yes, she's right. It's not how it's done. And so I don't think I'm a baby boomer. I'm not quite sure where I fit in there, but somewhere in there, we have to also relearn. So I think your book also I can definitely see as a great tool for all generations. I don't think it really matters. I think you bring so much in your book to help us all understand each other and how we can, what's the word, communicate and get along.
Just get along. I mean, it's interesting. There's so many us against them dynamics in our society right now. And one that isn't really talked about is generations, us and them. And we see it with the baby boomers and the millennials a lot, especially inside of organizations. I've given talks and the baby boomers are banging their head against the desk because they're like, these millennials have no idea what they're doing to us. And the millennials feel like this hostility towards baby boomers because we're like, we're not going to be exploited the way that you allowed yourself to be, the way that these things that have been normalized in society that are not necessarily healthy dynamics, that are not necessarily the way things have to be. The millennials seem to have a sensitivity about us that makes us not able to tolerate them. And they really deeply affect us in a way that we're not able to compartmentalize, the way other generations kind of just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and like do what needs to be done. And if you have a narcissistic boss who's never satisfied and you have to work 70 hours a week, and the millennials like, well, I would rather I'll drive Uber to avoid having to deal with you. So I can go to Costa Rica when I want to and just enjoy my youth and see this big wide world. We're a global generation. We're well-traveled. We are, I guess you could say, like seeking our bliss, which isn't always the most emotionally responsible thing to do. But, we want to live our best life now. And we have social media. So we're constantly kind of comparing ourselves to other people, like who's living the most amazing
right. Well,
life.
your generation really came up through that whole social media, internet boom, and so what I'm seeing is like you guys just know it. Like I know that when I need technical help with my computer or because I don't understand all of this, I want to work with a millennial because they just get it. They don't even have to be trained. They just know innately. It's like their language. So
yeah, I mean, we interpret ourselves and the world through technology, and everyone's like, they're glued to their cell phones, they're addicted to technology. Like this is literally how we communicate who we are. And it's what's helped us move into a networked society from a almost like chaotically capitalistic society. It's like to me the future change in the society is going to be based around quality of human relationships. And if they're able to take on this win-win dynamic where we are truly empowering each other and out of this victim-perpetrator dynamic that is so in our face right now, and it's really dividing us as a nation because the Black people feel victimized by white people and the women feel victimized by men and the millennials feel victimized by baby boomers and the poor feel victimized by the wealthy and the and then meanwhile the cartel, the mafia that's running the show is just getting away with it because we're not coming together. And that was another reason why I made sure to include all these different perspectives inside of the book, because empathy, I believe, is how we start to come together and really understanding other people's perspectives and stop turning them into the enemy or the other. And it's not that everyone's stories of victimization are valid, and I'm sorry for the pain that we all feel because of the way that things are. And we also have to still hold in our mind this possibility that that is not a dynamic that can exist. That's a dynamic that we can change in the future so that everyone is living in prosperity. And if you look at climate change and you look at these issues, that's kind of what we're being challenged to do to solve them.
You've mentioned climate change a few times, and so there's many different perspectives on that, because I feel there is climate change. I think it's definitely not global warming. It's something. Things are definitely changing, but there's also a lot of people out there that don't believe that, and I would say more probably the baby boomer generation or older, where they still don't really believe that anything's actually changing, that it's just freak weather. But I think there's a big shift happening on all levels with the weather. I think you millennials are more tuned in, but at the same time maybe feeling, well, what are we going to do about this? How can we change?
Well, so now 100% of scientists, unless they are not, their salaries are paid for by fossil fuel companies, they're like, this is a really big deal. This exists. This is true. This needs to be addressed. This is at the forefront. This needs to be at the forefront of what we're dealing with politically in all of our organizations. So we agree about that.
Right.
You can not believe that the tree exists outside of you. It doesn't mean you can't run into it when you're walking. So, but one of the biggest, I've been thinking about this a lot too. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is around misinformation. And we are growing up in this digital age where anyone can publish anything. And there are very large organizations who this change that needs to happen threatens the existence of these organizations and these industries and these monopolies, right, and the entire actually like infrastructure of our society and vested interests with financially baby boomers have invested a lot of their entire retirement portfolio into financial instruments that are a huge part of this. And so, it's like, can you convince people to divest? Can you, like, really, how aligned do we have to be? And we have to be very aligned to make these changes. And one of the biggest hurdles is around misinformation, because and then we all have our individual biases as well. And that was one of the hardest things about writing this book. It's like, how can I not be biased as I create this portrait of this generation and what's really going on in the world and like my own political leanings. Mm-hmm. And I went through this very long transformational process. It took me 5 years to write the book, partially because I had to work through so much of my own stuff around my own perspective. And then my editor was like, it's due. I'm like, but I'm not enlightened fully yet. I still don't know all the answers. She's like, well, it's due. I was like, okay, just send it in. So the next book will go on to pick up where this one left off. And, how can we really come together and unite over what is true and what needs to be done when there's so much arguments and, the cacophony of everyone here wanting to hear their own voice. Right. And how can we agree?
Well, everyone wants to be heard. I think that's the thing. But the one thing I feel is remembering what it was like when I was in my 20s and early 30s was that even then I would feel a sense of, well, what's my purpose here? What's really going on? And how do I navigate? So I kind of feel like that when we're younger, it's the same things kind of keep recapitulating themselves. Like back in the 60s, our parents were going to these concerts, I think, and, getting stoned and partying and being hippies and, wearing flower power everywhere. And so they went through that phase. But in the end, they became, respectable, in quotes, human beings doing the right thing. Which I feel, I don't think there is a right thing. And I feel like there's a lot of pressure for you guys as millennials that you have to you've already been put in a box that you don't communicate, that you're kind of like not really going to show up or all this stuff. But then I don't know, I think all people go through that phase. I think a lot of people do.
Oh, 100%. And that's part of it. How much of this is generational? How much of this is just the psychosocial time period that you're in human development? In the book, this book actually focuses mainly on emerging adulthood, which is that time period where you're very much in between.
Right.
And you're doing a lot of experimenting. There's a lot of questions around identity and who am I and what's my purpose, and a need to kind of see the world and explore, to be able to say, like, consciously, like, this is what I'm here to do before we plug in. But what we're seeing with the millennials is that it's taking us longer than ever to do this. And part of that is systemic. And that's when it starts to become generational.
Right.
Yeah. So it's all very interesting stuff.
So you were saying that you have like an organization where you help people. So I mean, do you do workshops? What do you do? Can people find out about you, or if they want to learn more about how they can transcend, into the positive aspects of being a millennial? Because obviously you all have a lot of wisdom, and you're pretty tapped in. That's what my experience is.
Fair. So yes, you can find more about it on www.millennials-incorporated.com. And what I do for that is go into organizations, and I do cross-generational reconciliation work inside of organizations. Corporate America lost $30 billion in 2017 due to millennial turnover. So what I see this as is a bit of a Trojan horse, maybe you could say, to go in and start transforming corporate culture from within, so that business can start becoming a force for incredible good for people, so that when millennials do get a job at a company, we're treated in a way that actually compels us to be loyal to it. Want to stay because this business is actually helping to solve the problems that we are inheriting created by that business. And it's all like that is just corporate social responsibility. It's these movements that are happening. So everything I do isn't aligned with that. And I do very cost sensitive, custom tailored organizational strategies to transform company cultures in a way that is proven to help increase retaining millennial employees. And one really interesting thing, I think one of the reasons why millennials are so in the hot seat is because we are 3 times the size of Gen X. So what we're finding, and the baby boomers are about the same size as millennials, even though millennials are a little bigger. So what we're finding is that baby boomers are reaching retirement age, because millennials are cycling through entry-level positions. There's large leadership gaps forming inside of organizations. So while baby boomers had a work ethic where they spend 60 to 70 hours a week at the job at the same company for 30 years, they're questioning if they're able to retire, if someone's going to be able to fill their shoes. And then moreover, you're seeing companies, part of this is because of Amazon and e-commerce, but you're seeing companies like Kmart and Sears go bankrupt because they are not transforming into what millennial consumers want. They're not places where we want to work. So what we're finding is that this evolution of business has to happen for these companies to stay alive, because millennials we're not drinking the koolaid. We're not compelled by this. We see through it. We are tapped in, like you said. We have the most formal degrees of any generation. We were stuck on our phones reading information all day. We know what's going on, and the problem is that it just seems it's so much. It feels like it's so much we don't even know where to start. And the place where we start for me is at work, and we start with our own in personal relationships, and it's all about taking on different dynamics of just having this be like positive and creative, problem solving, fun, healthy, we can do it.
Have it all.
Yes, and millennials want to have it all, and other people they're coddled, they're spoiled, they're entitled. Like, no, we want to have it all.
But I think you can have it all. That's the thing. I don't feel that about millennials, actually. I mean, for me, I think millennials are full of a lot of wisdom, and they do work. They just want to work doing what they want to do when they want to do it. And so as long as you're okay with that, it's good. But my experience is all the people helping me with my podcast are all millennials. I love them. They're great.
I love us too.
love you guys. And you know, and I think for me, a lot of the technology stuff is very challenging. So I really appreciate everything that you bring to the table. So I was just wondering that do you go into companies and help? Like if you're, do you go and talk to the baby boomers about how to handle and communicate with millennials, or to better, like, create better work environments, or?
Yes, so it's baby boomer oriented. Then there's also stuff that's just for millennials.
Right.
I think millennials have a lot of mental illness that we deal with as well, like really highly documented rates of depression and anxiety. And I go into these workplaces, they're like, I don't understand. My millennial just like walks up and leaves in the middle of the day. And I'm like, they're having a panic attack in the walk-in. I'm like, that's like where they walk up and go. So, because it's a lot. It's a lot. There's a lot going on inside of us. We haven't been given the tools to deal with it. So some of it is around capacity building for millennials.
Okay.
Some of it's around management and realizing, you know, there's this whole like life coach, like everyone just like quits their job and becomes a coach these days. And I'm like, well, really, millennials want managers who are coaches? The best manager I've ever had was a soccer coach in her previous career. And it was like, that's what we want. Like, we want like life coaches at work.
At work.
At work. So everyone should just become a life coach for a Fortune 500 company inside of this.
When you say life coach, you mean you're talking about being supported?
It's not about micromanaging.
Yeah.
You know, do this by this. It's like, it's about, we want managers who are like, what are the internal blocks that are keeping you from performing at your highest, that are keeping you from being as engaged as you can be at work? Because millennials just aren't able to compartmentalize our emotions the way other we come with them.
Right.
We come with them. That's you're going to have to acknowledge that aspect of our psyche if you want to earn our loyalty. So yeah, and a lot of what I found with the generational dynamic is that a lot of older people were taught that they had to repress that aspect of themselves in order to survive, whereas the millennials grew up with a different parenting style where they were almost... It's interesting because you look at generations too, you're also looking at psychological research around parenting that evolves, you know, pretty rapidly as well. So millennials were able to kind of have our emotions more.
Right.
We were lavish with material goods, a lot of us, with parents who weren't home, two-income households.
Right, so you had to, in some ways, parent yourself.
We parented ourselves, and then we have these like emotions that we don't know how to control. So it's great that we can feel them, because that's a step forward from repressing them. But how do we control them so that they don't control us? And when you're in a victim mentality, you're just letting your emotions control you. So I go in and I also like teach these skills to people and teach managers these things, creating trauma-informed workplaces as well, because sexual harassment, racism, all of this stuff, if people don't feel safe to be who they are inside of their job, you can't even access the part of your brain where you're performing at your highest level, because you're all back here in the amygdala, you know, worried that someone's going to bully you or you're going to lose your job. And inside of a lot of these corporate environments, everyone's just afraid they're going to lose their job because everyone's trying to get that promotion, and there's only a few seats that you can get the promotion.
And also I think now what I see is that the millennials or the younger people, they're not really getting paid. Like, they're being asked to do a lot of work and they're not getting paid what I call a decent salary, which enables them to just live a nice basic life, not an extravagant life, but just where I can put food on the table and I can pay my bills. And I don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to do that.
Yeah, when I hear these GOP guys saying that they don't want to get taxed at a 70% rate when they have, you know, they're making $14 million a year, I said, well, maybe you should get a second job.
Right. That's really funny.
If you don't think you have enough Get a second job.
Well, that's kind of probably a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole other. But yeah, I mean, you see that too, and so it's also creating compassion around. Hey, like we grew up. Inflation with student loans, inflation with how much higher education costs, and some of us get degrees and things that there's not even jobs for.
No, I know a few people that have, spent a long time in college and then they came out and then they were like, oh, well, I didn't think I had to get, I didn't realize I had to, have a degree where I could actually get a job.
Right, and you're 17, you're like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And you're like, you don't even know how the world works. And then we have automation, we have AI. We have all of these technological explosions that are happening that are totally going to change the landscape. And in many ways, it can help us because it can help us get rid of these jobs that don't really reflect the potential we have creatively as human beings. These iterative manual labor tasks that are actually bad for the body, bad for, we're capable of so much creativity as humans. So in some ways it can be good, but, for what I see is millennials, one of our greatest strengths is that we're so adaptable. And even though we might leave our jobs all of the time, it's because we're used to changing. We can fly by the seat of our pants. We can start a new company. We can figure it out. Like we're figuring it out. We're just not doing it the way other generations did.
And I think, well, first of all, I think this is a great place to, we're coming to the end of our podcast. So I think that's a great place to stop because I think that is, millennials have the capacity to change and to move. And I don't know if there's some last parting gift you'd like to leave us.
Well, let's change together. Let's transform. I think that's the highest thing we could ask for is just a transformation in a positive direction. So let's do it together.
Thank you so much, Alison. We're so grateful to have you on our podcast, and this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Thanks so much, Alison Sher, for being on the Be a Smart Woman show today and sharing with us your wisdom and insight on the Millennials generation and what led you to write your book, The Millennials Guide to Changing the World. You can find out more about Alison by checking out her website, www.millennials-incorporated.com. You can also follow Alison on Facebook or Instagram, and you can purchase her book on Amazon. Wraps up our Be a Smart Woman podcast for today. I hope that you discovered something about yourself during today's podcast, as I truly believe we can learn something from everyone we meet. If you like what you heard today, I invite you to subscribe and leave a review. We'd love to have you in our Be a Smart Woman family. You can also follow and like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you've got questions or think you have a story to share, you can find our contact information at beasmartwoman.com. Thank you for listening and see you next time.